chapter, that is sound and hearing. That is chapter 11. So, what the main objectives of this chapter are going to be is you're going to be learning what sound is, how to describe different kinds of sounds. Then you're going to be learning different aspects of sounds, how sound is produced. Then we'll be doing different terminologies related to the sound, that how we describe sound using terminology such as frequency, amplitude, pitch, etc., etc. And then finally, you will be doing comparing sound in the form of wave. You will be describing how sounds are such as as a wave, how they travel as a wave, and what labelings do we do when we're making a sound wave. Then we'll be describing how sounds travel through different mediums, what speeds do they travel at. Then we'll be finally doing how the parts of our ear, which means that the sensory organs of a human body or of an animal, or how they translate and detect sound. So let's start off with. So the first thing that we're going to do is how sounds are made and what sound is. Now, when we're talking about sound, we know that we hear different kinds of sounds, such as your traffic, such as hearing other people talk, stuff like that. Now, how these sounds are made is through some sources, which means that if you're hearing a traffic noise, it's going to be through some traffic horns or through transportations, things like that. And if you're hearing someone talk, it's obviously going to be some person who's going to be talking, and you'll be hearing that specific sound. And same goes with musical sounds, that you'll be hearing sounds that are going to be coming out of instruments. So these are going to be your sources of sound. Now, when you're hearing sound, what really is sound? How sounds are made? So when we're defining sound, we say that sound is a form of energy produced by vibrations which can be detected by our ears. So sound is produced when something vibrates, and an energy is produced, a form of energy is produced that we call sound, and it can easily be detected by our ears. So whenever we have vibrations such as the vibrations of objects such as the tuning fork, so a tuning fork, what it does is when we vibrate a fork, it produces vibrations, and those vibrations are traveled through the medium that is air in this case, and that sound is heard by us human beings. And when we're talking about sound is, we've talked that how sound is produced and what sources are producing sound. Now, how does that sound reach the human ear? So the traveling of sound wave occurs through rarefactions and compressions. Now, in the following diagram that you can see displayed on the screen, you can see compressions labeled on the top of the wave, whereas rarefactions are labeled on the bottom of the wave. So we say that sound waves, when they produce rarefactions and compressions in a form of wave, that is when they travel through a medium. Now, what are rarefactions and compressions? So the regions where your molecules of air are spread out are called rarefactions, which means that this is where your air is not going to be compressed. And the region where your air molecules are compressed and close together are going to be called as compression. So the highest point of your wave, that is going to be this specific point, is going to be your compression. And the lowest point of your wave is going to be your rarefaction. And in this specific wave, we're just talking about the sound wave. So what happens is that whenever there's a vibration produced, that vibration, it travels through the air. Now, how it travels is that it travels when air molecules, they spread the sound out. We speak or we produce some sound through vibration. That vibration, it hits the next air molecule that is the closest to it. That specific air molecule, it hits the next air molecule, and that is how the transfer of sound takes place. So it travels through the entire air molecules, and whenever it hits a molecule, it is compressed, and then when it leaves that molecule, it is then relaxed. So that is when one compression and one rarefaction is produced, and that is how we define one complete sound wave, which means that the region where it starts from, that is the zero, that is this vertical axis. And when it goes through one compression and one rarefaction, this is where your wave is ending. So this is going to be your wavelength. Now you can either describe it as one entire compression, one entire rarefaction, or you can describe it as two compressions, because this is going to be the same length. This specific wavelength that they've mentioned is going to be the same, such as from here to here, from the start to the end of the first rarefaction. So you can define the wavelength such as two consecutive compressions or two consecutive rarefactions that is given in the bottom. So you have three wavelengths here, or the third one from 0 to the end of the first rarefaction. So you have three definitions of your wavelength, but the most commonly used is going to be the length between two compressions or the length between the two rarefactions, because it's easy to define it all. So this is how your sound is going to be traveling through different mediums. Now, a specific thing that you need to remember here is that sound cannot travel through vacuums. And why is that so? Is because I just told you that sound is traveling through a medium when there are air molecules present, which transfer the sound from one place to another. So when we're talking about vacuums, vacuums do not contain air molecules. Vacuums are vacant. So since they do not contain air molecules, there is no medium of travel that sound can get from there. So sound is not going to travel through vacuums. However, sound needs a medium to travel. Therefore, a medium such as a liquid or a gas or a solid is where sound is going to travel through. Now, when we talk about the speed of the sound through different mediums, is we categorize them as such that sound travels the fastest through solids, it then travels through liquids, and it travels the slowest through the gases. And that is because sound, when talking about solids, they are closely packed together. So they have air molecules or any particles close together. And liquids, they have particles a bit far away, and gases, they have particles very far away from each other. So that is why sound is going to travel the fastest in the solids. Now, when we're talking about the approximate speed of sound, it is 343 meters per second in air. It is 1482 meters per second in water, and it is 960 meters per second in steam. So you're not supposed to remember all of them, but the speed of sound in air is very important. So you should know that it travels at a speed of 343 meters per second in air. And generally, you should know that the sound travels the fastest through the solids. All right?
All right. Okay.
Do you have any questions up to now?
No, I'm clear.
Now, coming to the concept about how do we hear sounds. So we know that we have sensory organs that are our ears, which can detect sounds. And what they do is they convert the sound energy, which is coming through the wave, into electrical signals, which are sent to the brain. However, this is done through an entire process, and you can see the human ear figure displayed on the screen. So what happens is that our human ear, it is divided into three parts: the external ear or the outer ear, then the middle ear, and then the inner ear. So we have these three parts of the human ears. So what happens is that when sound waves are transmitted through the ear, they are first collected by this specific, you can say, a funnel-shaped outer ear. So they're collected here in the auricle, or you can say the outer ear, that is also called the pinna. So it directs the sound waves through the ear canal, which is this specific part of your ear. It travels through the ear canal to the eardrum. Now, eardrum is specifically mentioned over here. So this is going to be your eardrum, that is in the scientific language called the tympanic membrane. So your eardrum, the sound hits the eardrum, and eardrum is a very thin sheet of membrane, and you can see that by the scientific name as well, that the tympanic membrane is also known as the eardrum. And when it reaches the eardrum, the vibrations of air molecules they make the eardrum vibrate. And when the eardrum vibrates, it sets up vibrations in the hammer, in the anvil, and in the stirrup. So the hammer, the anvil, and the stirrup are parts of the middle ear, which are the malleus, the incus, and the third one is not mentioned here. So these are going to be your hammer, anvil, and stirrup. Oh, staves, yeah, it's mentioned. So this is the part of your middle ear where the vibrations of produced by the eardrum are going to travel through. Now these are three tiny bones inside our ear. They're arranged in a, you can say, a level-like manner. So the vibrations in the stirrup are greater than those in the eardrum. So because they travel from the high area to the low area, so in the stirrup the vibrations are going to be the highest. Now, when they reach the stirrup, what happens is that they pass through, it passes the vibrations to the inner ear. So from the inner ear, the first thing that happens is that there's this cochlea, this coiled kind of tube that is filled with fluid. What happens is that these vibrations, that when they enter the cochlea, they make the fluid vibrate, and this moves the tiny hairs that the cochlea has. And these tiny hairs, they respond to the vibrating fluid by producing electrical signals. So the electrical signals are produced by a fluid in the cochlea, and they're sent through the auditory nerve to the brain. And this brain then interprets the electrical signals as sound. So this is going to be the passageway that your sound waves or your vibrations are going to follow, so that they reach the brain, where the sound is interpreted as electrical signals and then converted into sound by our brain, which means that our brain, it interprets the electrical signals as sounds. Now, this is how the sound is going to enter the brain. An important thing to mention here is that our ears and eardrums, they're very delicate organs, and if the eardrum is damaged, a person may become partially deaf or permanently deaf. So there's a range of frequencies of a sound that a human ear can bear. So if the frequency range exceeds that specific limit, so we can have problems related to our hearing, right? Do you have any questions?
No.
Forward then. So the characteristics of sound. Now there's different things, different terms that we use to describe sound, to characterize sound, and to give sound specific properties that we can define it through. So you must have heard the word the pitch, that when we're using we're differentiating between, let's say, a man's and a woman's voice. We say that a woman's voice is a lower pitched voice, whereas a man's voice is a higher pitched voice. And just like that, children also have lower pitched voices. So we use that term in our daily life, but we do not know what pitch, how pitch is defined. So pitch is, you can say it is measured in terms of frequency. So pitch is related to the frequency, and frequency is the number of vibrations in a second. So whenever you're going to define frequency, frequency is going to be the number of vibrations in a second. So pitch is defined by frequency, and frequency is going to be the number of vibrations in a second. So whenever we are talking about a sound with a high frequency, it is going to have a high pitch also. And whenever we're talking about a sound with a lower frequency, it is also going to be having a lower pitch. So you tell me if these two are directly proportional. If we are talking about a woman's voice and I'm saying that it is low pitched, is it going to have a higher frequency or a lower frequency?
Could you just repeat that?
See, I'm saying that when we're talking about pitch and frequency, they're directly related, which means that if a voice has a higher pitch, it's going to have a higher frequency. And if it has a lower pitch, it is going to have a lower frequency. So we're talking about a woman's voice and it is low pitched. So is it going to have a high frequency or a low frequency?
A high frequency or a low frequency?
Yeah.
It will have a
It is low pitched. So it's going to have a,
low pitch frequency.
yeah, so it's going to have a low pitch and a low frequency. So frequency, it defines your pitch. So when we're talking about frequency, the unit of frequency is going to be hertz. So we measure frequency in hertz, and it's given over here as well. The symbol that we use to represent hertz is going to be Hz. And I already told you that there's a specific range of frequencies that the human ear can bear or listen to. So that is going to be 20 to 20,000 hertz. And this is a very important value that you must remember, because a human ear cannot hear voices that have a frequency lower than 20 or higher than 20,000 hertz. So it's going to be an important value that is going to appear in your MCQs or in your questions or anywhere where you're going to be attempting any exam. So what happens is that we're talking about the range of frequency that the human ear can hear. Now, the frequencies that are lower than 20 hertz are going to be called infrasounds, and the sounds that are going to be above a frequency of 20,000 hertz are going to be called ultrasounds. And these two sounds, infrasound and ultrasound, cannot be heard by humans because our frequency range is 20 to 20,000 hertz. So this is going to be all about your pitch. Let's move towards loudness. Now, you've heard loudness, you know what loud means. So obviously, a loud sound has more energy than a soft sound. So we can describe sounds as loud or soft. Now, loudness, it is measured in decibels, that has a symbol of dB, and loudness depends upon amplitude. Now, what is the amplitude? When we're talking about a wave, let's say that you have this specific wave in the middle of the diagram. When we're talking about the amplitude, when you have an axis and a horizontal axis in between, the length from the axis to the top of the compression, or the length from the axis to the bottom of the rarefaction, is going to be called your amplitude. So the vertical length of the wave from the horizontal axis is going to be your amplitude. And loudness and amplitude are related in the same way as that of the pitch and frequency. So they're directly related, which means that if you have a higher amplitude or a higher vertical height of your wave, you're going to have a loud sound. Whereas if you have a lower amplitude, you're going to have a low sound. So they're also directly related. Now, when we're talking about this specific diagram that is shown on the slide, what happens is that you have this specific wave that we're talking about right now. Now, if you need to increase the loudness, what we're going to increase? We're going to increase the amplitude. So whenever we're increasing the loudness, we're increasing the amplitude. And whenever we're decreasing the loudness, we're decreasing the amplitude. So loudness is going to be related to the amplitude of the wave. And when we're increasing the pitch, we're going to increase the frequency, which means that if there were 2 waves being made, now there are 4 waves being made. So if you need to increase the pitch of the voice, you're going to increase the frequency. And when you need to decrease the pitch, you're going to lower the frequency. So you had 2 waves here, and now you have 1 single wave. So your pitch is always going to relate to your frequency. So these are 2 important concepts that are going to be used in a lot of questions further. So you need to be clear about how pitch and frequency are related and how loudness and amplitude are related. And this specific diagram, I guess it explains that really, really well. Okay, do you have any questions up to now?
No.
Are you sure?
Yes.
All right. Okay, so summarizing it, we have already done all of these. So the sound wave, important terminologies that come under the topic of your sound wave or the labeling of the wave are going to be your wavelength, your frequency, and your amplitude. So whenever we're describing your wavelength, your wavelength is going to be the distance from one crest to another or one trough to another. And if that is hard to remember, you can say that it is the distance between two consecutive compressions. I'd already told you that these are going to be compressions, or they're going to be the wavelength, the length between two consecutive rarefactions. So when we're talking about frequency, your frequency is going to be the number of waves produced per second. So whenever you have this specific wave, for example, you had one written over here, which means that you had 1 second, and a zero over here. So you had two complete waves in 1 second. So your frequency would be 2 hertz. So the number of waves that are going to be produced in just 1 second is going to be your frequency. And when we're talking about amplitude, amplitude is going to be the vertical height. Your vertical height either from the horizontal axis to the top of the wave, or the vertical height from the axis, the horizontal axis to the bottom of the wave. Both of these are going to be your amplitude, which are directly related to the loudness of the sound, and the frequency is related to the pitch of the sound. All right.
All right.
Okay. So do you have any questions related to anything? Or are you confused about anything at all? So you are free to ask me.
No, I'm sure I'm okay.
Okay, all right. Then you've got these review questions that I'd like you to solve. So you've got